Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. To begin this episode, we are going to do some additional wiring, and what we're going to be working on is wiring in the new digital speedometer. So this is a digital cobalt speedometer from Autometer, and this needs to go in the car so I obviously know how fast I'm going when I'm going down the road. So we have the gauge, we have the mounting cup, and we need to start off by doing some modifications to the mounting cup. So this little sleeve, threaded sleeve that these two bolts are going into, that's aluminum, and I need to weld it to the steel cage. So I need to make a steel sleeve, and I'm going to do that using some tubing from Home Depot Racing, as well as a couple of M6 fasteners, also from Home Depot Racing. So I'll make my own sleeve based off of the dimensions of the sleeve that Autometer sent, and then that will be welded to the cage itself. So let's go ahead and get that sleeve crafted, and then we can get to actually mounting this gauge and getting it wired. Well, after a little bit, we now have a speedometer in addition to our fuel level gauge. It's down here. So when I power up, you can see the nice readout there on the speedometer, nice readout on the fuel level, and this thing's all calibrated now. So 100% on the gauge is in fact 100% in the tank itself. So you probably won't be able to see it, or if you do, it'll be very slight. Yeah, you see just the very slight dimming on that, and then down here, fuel level illuminates. So both of these gauges are wired in, everything is good there. And now that the wiring is completed, we can move on to some actual mechanical engine work. Let's focus the efforts today on pulling the oil pan off of the Mark IV. So this thing has had a bit of an oil leak. One in the back there is the transmission again, but this one in the front and where the kitty litter is, those are engine oil leaks. And it's something that I've been meaning to look into and to deal with, but to do that, it's quite a bit of work. So there's two ways that I can accomplish this. I can either pull the engine out of the car, or I can drop the subframe and work on the engine in the car. It is less work to drop the subframe than it is to pull the engine, so that is the route that we're going to go. So I need to go ahead, raise the car up, see what all needs to be disconnected, begin disconnecting those things, and hopefully before too long I can have the subframe out of this and start removing the oil pan. after a few hours, the dry sump pan is removed, and we now have a rare upskirt shot of the bottom end of the Supra. So you can see billet main caps, aluminum rods. These are L19 main studs, factory crank, and it really isn't anything all that crazy. But the focus right now is not on what the bottom end is comprised of. It is rather on the oil pan itself. So I've already gone ahead and stripped some of the RTV off, and I presume that the pan itself is, or the seal between the pan rail on the pan and the pan rail on the bottom side of the block, is the culprit for causing the leak issue. So now that I have this off, I can clean everything up, and I've already, like I said, I've already gone ahead and taken the majority of the RTV off of the engine side, and I just need to clean this, and then we can try to reinstall everything once my new RTV arrives. So I'm going to be using Honda parts on the Supra in terms of the RTV. Honda Bond, if you guys are familiar with it, it's supposed to be a really, really good RTV, and everybody rants and raves about it, so we're going to give it a shot on this. So that stuff, the Honda Bond is due in at any point in time now, so I'll take the initiative in the meantime to go ahead and clean all of this stuff up, so that way when the Honda Bond does arrive, it's just a matter of applying the RTV, putting the pan back in place, and then reinstalling and undoing all of the disassembly that we've done so far in this video. Well, with a fresh coat of Steal-It, the miracle paint on the dry sump pan, this is all ready to go back on once I do one final cleaning of the inside of it. So underneath of the car, I went ahead and I cleaned up the pan rail, took all the old RTV off, and this is ready to accept the new pan. And I also have 2 tubes of Honda Bond. So it's kind of funny to use Honda parts on something like this, but for RTV and for how good the stuff is supposed to be, we're going to give it a shot and see if it actually works. So let me go ahead and get everything cleaned up, and then we can get to the reassembly of this whole oil pan and this whole system. And since it did not seem like the old RTV had great adhesion to the pan rail on the pan, I went ahead and sanded this to rough it up a little bit, so that way hopefully the RTV will bite onto the pan a little bit better than it did before. Well, the oil pan is reinstalled now, and this whole thing is ready for the front subframe to go back in place. So the Honda Bond appears to have squished out exactly how I wanted it to, and now I don't have the big dollop of RTV sticking out of the front of this any longer, which makes me pretty happy. So I guess the only thing left to do at this point is first clean up this mess, so that way both that will roll up here more easily, and I'm not having an internal meltdown every time that I look down or step on this. So I'll clean all this mess up, and then we can get to reinstalling the subframe. And before too long, and hopefully by the end of the day, this whole thing will be reassembled. And I'm going to let the RTV cure for a little while, but we can at least fire this thing up and test for leaks by the end of the video. Well, that's not a bad way to spend the day. So the whole front subframe, front end, oil pan, all of that on the Mark IV is reassembled. And like you guys saw, I put a nice new coat of Steelip on the oil pan. You can see the RTV sticking through, meaning that it actually did smash between the this radius portion of the pan and the radius portion of the front cover. All of the lines are back in place. Everything is zip tied back up. Everything's tight. Everything is the way that it was when I took this apart, at least as far as I can remember and as far as I know. So the only thing left to do at this point is to test and see if it leaks, see if it still has oil pressure and everything else first. But we can test it, make sure that everything is good to go, and if we don't put oil on the ground again, then this was a massive success, and it's one thing that I can rest easy, not having to worry about there being oil on the ground and checking the oil level and so on and so forth. Well, the RTV has had a day to dry, and I'm feeling probably as confident as I'm going to fire this thing up and make sure we still have oil pressure and see if there are any additional leaks. So I initially wanted to take it for a drive, but you can see it's kind of a dreary, nasty day. We had some rain this morning, and I believe there is more on the way. So this thing on radials is definitely not a wet weather vehicle. So a drive will have to wait until another day, but I can at least fire it up and check engine vitals and make sure everything is good to go that way. It's been a few hours since I ran the car, and we still don't have any oil leaks. So this was a massive success, and it actually ended up being easier than I initially thought it was going to be. I have to credit my friend Logan at Defined Auto Works for causing me to shift my focus and shift the angle that I was looking at this from. Well, I was initially planning to pull the engine and do this reseal on the engine stand. Just trying to do more work to be lazy, if that makes sense, as that way I could have the engine on the stand in front of me, I could rotate it, flip it upside down, I could seal the pan, do all of that, but that also necessitates loosening all of these lines. All the different systems that go into the engine would have to be taken off. And that was a lot more work, or that would be much more work than just dropping the subframe out of it. So Logan, thank you very much for causing me to shift focus and causing me to do this, what ended up being the easy way, and saving me a whole lot of time and effort. So there's nothing coming around the mating between the pan flange and the pan rail on the bottom of the block. There's a couple of drops on the ground that I think are just coming out of the ends of the fittings here. So that isn't the end of the world. I can live with that, and I can always remake lines and use better lines in the future. But for now, at least we're not gushing oil out of this thing like it was before. So we'll call this whole reseal a great success. So with the oil pan now sealed up on this thing, and even though I unfortunately was not able to take it out for a drive, I'm fairly confident that the oil pan will stay sealed now. Hopefully it is not a repeat of the transmission debacle, but we'll have to wait and see. But that's going to be the end of this episode, and we're very rapidly approaching the point in time when this thing can go in the dyno. I think we have one last thing to take care of before that happens in the form of some thermal management, but that'll be upcoming in the very near future, and then it will be just a matter of time, or just a matter of figuring out the time that I can take this thing over and actually get it on the dyno. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, for coming along on the ride with this thing with me, with the Mark II, with all the other projects that we've done over the years, for buying merch, for buying manifolds, for allowing me to do the things that I enjoy, and hopefully you guys find some enjoyment out of them as well. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you guys very much, and I hope to see you all in the future as I continue to do this. But with all of that being said, and before I ramble on incessantly, that'll be the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.